Hi, everyone. Welcome to another GMAT Club mock interview live with Kriti. Kriti is applying to multiple business schools this season in round two, one of which is Duke Fuqua. So we are going to do a mock interview for Duke Fuqua. So I'm going to assume that I'm going to pretend to be a Duke Fuqua alumni interviewer. I did not go to Duke Fuqua, but I know a ton of people there, have a fair idea of the culture, and actually was in the area back in 2018. It's actually pretty beautiful.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
Kriti, I'm happy to see you. Why don't we
Happy to
start
see you
with
too.
you telling me a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Thanks a lot for having me, first of all. So I'm from New Delhi. I have undergraduated in business as well. The reason why my undergraduate degree was also in business was because my dad started his own digital agency when I was still in school. And that really motivated me towards the field of business. He used to always gift me these autobiographies of great leaders like Steve Jobs and Phil Knight. And just reading those, growing up on those books and words, I was always motivated to join a field of business. In college, I took up many leadership positions because I was always inclined to learn more from the practical aspect of the business school than just the theory. I experimented with different leadership styles. I made a lot of great friends, and I had a lot of exposure very early on, for which I'm very grateful. I also got recruited from my college. It was a campus recruitment. I was one of the five out of around 150, 200 applicants to get selected and shortlisted for PwC. I've been with PricewaterhouseCoopers for around 2 years. First, I was with PwC Pune. I had a lot of exposure back there because this was not the headquarters of something like a Bangalore office or a Gurgaon office. This was a smaller office space. So early on, I had the exposure to work with a lot of big MNCs just when I started on. I've always been inclined towards the social and a sustainable sector, which is why once I completed around year and a half with PwC Pune, I had a discussion with my managers there, and I decided to take on a full-time 7-month project with an NGO, a national level NGO, for which I moved back to Delhi, which is where I'm from. Once the project had ended, I again joined back PwC. This time it was PwC Gurgaon. And since then, I've been working with PwC Gurgaon. Also, one more thing which I think I would like to add here, because this also really defines me, is that recently I founded a startup of my own this year. The idea was always in my head, but just the COVID-19 situation and the lockdown gave birth to it, and it became bigger than I actually thought it would. It is also in the social and sustainable sector. And to grow this further is why I'm now looking forward to do an MBA from Duke Fuqua, because I realized there are certain constraints that I have, because of which I'm not able to grow a sustainable business into a profitable one. And because of which now I look forward to coming to the school and getting those skills.
Cool. Okay. What did you think about this answer?
I think I rambled a lot, maybe. I'm not sure if it was the correct. I think I should not have spoken for more than 1.5 minutes, but there was just so much that I wanted to fit in. So I did not know when to stop
Right.
or what information to cut out.
Okay. I actually think the timing was fine. So this first question is where you get a little bit of a leeway in terms of time. So, like a ton of people will give you like random advice that, your answer should be in less than 2 minutes or, less than 1 minute. I mean, those things are generally never right because your answer should be good. Regardless of the amount of, I mean, of course, you shouldn't take 10 minutes to answer the question, but like if your story makes sense and if your story is interesting, and your interviewer is listening to your story, who cares if it's like 2 minutes or four? I think lengthwise, I think you were about maybe 3 minutes, like 2.5 3 minutes, and I think that was fine. i
Mhm.
don't i, I don't see any problem with that. I think a couple of things that you did really well was this whole answer is a lot about um, expressing the decisions behind your career transitions, right? Like, okay, so if you went to this specific undergrad program, why did you do that? Like, why did you pick
Yeah.
this program over others? Which I think you did very well. And then maybe, like, of all the jobs that you got out of business school in undergrad, why PwC? And then you went back to an NGO, why that? And then you came back to PwC. I think most of those things were really well done. I think a couple of
Okay.
things where you could maybe give me less details was around why you picked business. I think you big because
Okay.
this whole decision happened when I'm guessing you were 17 years old, right? Like that
Yeah.
was that was a long time back, and you were very young. So I think going on for too long about like I had so many autobiographies of great business people that sort of inspired me to get an undergrad in business. It might be a little bit tricky because you gave me the example of Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs, much to his credit, wasn't the best business person as much as he was the best tech person. Like if you were if you were inspired by Steve Jobs, I think the careers or the undergrads that you would go with would probably have to do more with tech and products than more traditional businesses, right? So
Got
that
it.
was just
Yeah.
my touch feedback. I think if you had to reframe that answer, I would maybe directly jump in like, hey, look, I mean, I come from a family of entrepreneurship. My father was an entrepreneur, and he always made sure that I understood and realized the value or the positive impact that a business can bring, which brought me
Mhm.
to my undergrad degree majoring in business. So I think that's
Got it.
that way it's shorter, but it get the point across just as well. Um,
Yeah.
I think you told me about joining PwC as like a really prestigious thing to do. You said there were like, 5 out of 200-ish people. I think that's fine. I don't think that's a problem, but tell me a little bit more about, why PwC? Like, why not something like a CPG, or why not something in IT? Just tell me like a little bit more as to why would you want to work for a consulting firm or an audit consulting firm, whatever, rather than any of these companies? So just maybe one sentence on like, look, I mean, I wanted to be an entrepreneur eventually, or maybe I wanted to start my own business. And one of the ways I wanted to learn is to see how different kinds of businesses work. And it was super
Makes
challenging to
sense.
get into consulting right out of undergrad, but I was able to do it. I did my work at PwC, where I worked with this sector or this industry. I think now, depending on who your interviewer is going to be, I mean, I think if it's an Indian person, then it's fine. But if not an Indian person, it's sometimes maybe a little bit tricky for them to understand the differences between Bangalore, Pune, and Gurgaon.
Okay.
So, I mean, I
Yeah.
would maybe replace them with, like, it was not the headquarter, it was a smaller regional office. However, it
Yeah.
did give me the exposure very early to work with some of the major clients, such as this and this, or some major clients in this sector or that. I think that would
Hmm.
sort of make more sense. I also really
Hmm.
liked how you ended the answer. I think the best why, tell me about yourself, or the best introduction is also about, moving to the MBA and moving to the reason why you're here. So I think that worked really well for you as well. You ended the answer with, I have my own startup now, which sort of came out of COVID. And I really liked how you ended it, like, like the lockdown and COVID, that sort of was the final straw. It was really well done. And but I realized that I have a few skills that I need to learn, which is why I'm here today. That was perfect. And I think that's what I advise people to do as well. Like when you're ending the introduction, don't end in like, yeah, so that's pretty much about me. No, I mean,
Hmm.
you should end it with like touching on the reason why you're doing an MBA. So I think that was really well done. Cool. So
Okay.
it's more the next question, Kriti. So tell me a little bit more about, you mentioned you want to do an MBA and you have some skills that you want to learn. So tell me a little bit more about that. What skills are you really looking for? And then let's talk specifically about how Fuqua can get you there.
Yeah. So the skills that I'm looking forward to gain from an MBA and specifically from Fuqua is how tech right now can enable small and sustainable businesses. Because right now, all consumers are moving towards a more sustainable lifestyle. They are growing more conscious of how they buy, what they purchase, and how that product is being sourced. And that inadvertently gets a lot of challenges in many things, such as logistics, packaging, profitability of a business, shelf life, because most organic and sustainable products across different categories do not have a shelf life as long as a factory produced product would. So I actually never thought about these challenges before actually founding a startup of my own, which is why I had been doing a lot of research on the faculty that different schools offer. And at Fuqua, I noted Professor Charles, who is specifically into tech, sustainability, and how that directly impacts operations. I'm looking forward to engaging in such conversations with him and also my peers to understand how tech can actually benefit and kind of lead the sustainable businesses forward. Because I think that that is the future and that is what all businesses are going towards. And also apart from that, my short-term goal is also to transition into consulting. Currently, I'm in more of an audit and a risk profile. To transition into consulting, a lot of resources that Fuqua would offer to me, such as their consulting groups and consulting clubs, and also the projects that we have, such as we get real life or real world projects in which we have to go and use our consulting skills. That would also be very beneficial for me to make the transition. And of course, the Career Center at Fuqua is so well known for helping with these transitions. So those are the specific skills that I'm looking forward to gaining from an MBA and specifically from Fuqua.
Okay, cool. I think structure-wise, I think you're doing really well. I think you are talking about, like, okay, this is what I want to get out of Fuqua. This is the startup that I had, and this is the problem that I sort of identified. I think a couple of challenges here. I think the first one was that I really wasn't sure what you are doing post MBA. I think when you were talking about your startup, I automatically assumed that, okay, so you're going to come back from Fuqua and do your startup, right? You're going to be able to learn all these new skills, and you'll be able to scale your startup or whatever, right? But then when you talked about consulting, you sort of lost me there a little bit.
Yeah.
So I would recommend maybe start the answer with what you really want to do, right?
Got it.
So one way to do that is to tell me a little bit more about the big problem that you're trying to solve. So this is how. So I recommend how everybody talk about their goals, right? So you don't jump into, okay, so 10 years from now, I want to be a partner in Deloitte. Like, nobody is inspired by that statement. Like, I mean, sure, you can be a partner, fine, but like, what problem are you really solving? That's just, a little boring. So what I would recommend is start with this problem, like start with this problem that you're trying to solve. And it could be things like, using tech to help, like sustainable, like agriculture, or using tech to improve shelf life of CPG products or perishables and stuff like that. So maybe you can talk about, like, in the long term, I want to be able to lead the movement where tech really helps, increasing the shelf life of organic products, which was the big challenge that I had in my startup. And immediately post MBA, in order to get there, I want to join a consulting firm, specifically focusing in the food industry and looking at how tech transforms the food industry. I think that would be good as just the basic intro. And then, to talk about how Fuqua can help me get there, I think three specific reasons stand out. Like, first, academic; second, like the professional stuff; and third, extracurricular. So generally, for this answer, what I would recommend, the structure should be like, okay, so you're the big problem that you're trying to solve, your long-term vision, then quick about your short-term goal, and then jump into Fuqua and try to structure the answer like in a forcible way. Like, okay, three things: one, academics; two, professional; three, extracurricular or fun stuff or whatever, right? And that sort of ends
Mm.
your answer in like a nice structure. You started with the problem, you told me how you would solve it, and then you told me how Fuqua would specifically help you get there. So I think the ingredients were all there in your answer, but just threading it together would have been helpful.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to ask though that should I start the answer by stating my short term and my long term goal? Because my long term goal is definitely my startup, but my short term goal is consulting.
Okay.
So just so that the admissions committee doesn't get confused that why am I suddenly getting consulting in, should I probably start
Yeah,
by stating?
yeah. I think it depends. Like, you definitely don't want to start with, okay, my long-term goal is to come back to my startup, and my short-term goal is consulting. You 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 don't want to do that, like, because then, I mean, sure, it's fine, they're factually correct, but it's very uninspiring. So what you want to do here is tell me why that's your long-term goal at the beginning, right? And then tell
Yeah,
me what kind of a short-term goal would help you get there, right? So if you
got
tell
it.
me right
Yeah,
at the beginning, like, look, I mean, eventually I want to come back to my startup or found something of my own, which is in very similar lines. But in order to get there, I think I need the exposure of strategy consulting in different companies in the food,
hmm,
whatever space you decide, right?
yeah, got
And
it. Yeah,
like, one of the ways I think I'll be able to do that is to join a consulting firm such as BCG, whatever, right out of my MBA, focusing on these specific practices. Now, how Fuqua really helps me get there is A, B, and C. Does that make
got
sense?
it. Yeah, yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Cool. All right. So, Kriti, can you tell me a little bit more about, a time when you disagreed with someone, and tell me specifically about, what was at stake, and what was the outcome?
Sure. So I'm going to go back to my college days. This was when I was leading the placement cell of my college, Symbiosis Center for Management Studies. We had a set process for placements for the past 10 years. But a lot of my peers for whom we actually did the placement exercise used to come up to the placement team asking for a bit more of a diversity in terms of companies that would come for recruitment. For example, most of the companies that would come in would be in the finance sector, like the Big 4, because we had made a good relations with them. Our alums were still strong in the companies. But a lot of students were now looking towards profiles in the marketing sector or the retail sector or probably the HR sector. The disagreement I had here was that we internally we were all deciding whether we can work on this or not, given our limited resources and our limited connections with the different sectors and the different companies in those sectors. Most of the placement team, which was a team of around 6 students, they assumed that we should not be going ahead with this and we should focus on our strengths, which was to keep getting in the Big 4, because they were, of course, they would get the brand value to our college. And if we started focusing our
Sure.
energy on getting different sectors and different varied companies, then maybe we would not be able to do justice to the companies that already came on campus. I felt differently here because the whole purpose of the placement cell was to actually serve to the needs of the students. And if the needs were changing, so did our so was supposed to change our thoughts and processes. What I did here was that I took the initiative to our faculty member. I told him that I would like to lead the resource department of the placement cell, which would focus specifically on getting new companies on campus. I formed a team. I recruited a few juniors of mine. I formed a team of 4 people. All my juniors brought in different skills to the team. Few were very good with networking. Few were good in cold calling. Few were good in having industry relationships. We went back to the
Sure.
drawing board. We kind of like made a whole plan on how we can continue to focus on the companies that are still coming on campus and also focus on different companies in different sectors, such as retail, FMCG, etc., etc. It was a tough process because it's a daunting experience to connect with companies, firstly, at such a young age, one, and also second, when we've had no prior connect, because usually in placements, the alums help a lot, and also having built strong relations with them in the past years, that helps a lot, and we didn't have either of those.
Right.
That was the challenge that we faced, but my team was strong. We had a lot of support from our college as well, and because of which we were actually able to get Amazon on campus, which was the first in the tech space. We could get Tommy Hilfiger, which was the first in the retail industry, and also Cushman and Wakefield, which was the first in real estate. So these were the top three companies that we got, and we got many smaller companies like digital agencies, etc., local digital agencies as well. I felt that at that time, when going back, when we were having the discussion of whether or not to go ahead with this venture, I feel that I could take a stand for what I thought was right, and I could speak on behalf of my batch, which was actually looking forward to these companies. And I was happy with how things turned out. And now, actually, they follow the same process that I started back in 2018. So the same process is being followed even now, and we're getting new companies every year. So this was a good achievement in the end.
Cool. Okay. All right. So overall, what did you think of the answer?
I think I thought of it just in the moment, so it went on a bit longer than it should have. I could have structured it a bit well, made it a bit more precise and to the point. I don't know if the content was good enough, because this was back to my college. I took the AdCom back to my college experience, not my professional experience. So I'm not sure if that is looked down upon or if that would be fine. So I'm actually mixed. I don't know if this was a good enough answer or not.
Okay, cool. So tell me something. When you were, thinking about this example and answering this question, were you following a mental structure in your head, like a star or something like that? Were you following something like that in your head, or
I was
were you just
eyeballing
it?
No, I was trying
no,
to
because
follow
it came out. I think you're. Yeah, no, I think I definitely saw the structure. I think the structure was definitely not an issue. I liked it. Like you told me, like just purely in terms of how the interview structure was. I think you told me the situation. You then specifically laid out, this is what we did and this was the result. So I think that was that was neat, and I think that was neatly done. I also think you sort of laid out the conflict well. Like, there's like an easy way, which is to get the big fours, or there is the hard way to actually listen to our students. And I think what I would like maybe a little bit more would be to give me the stakes. Like, what would happen if you said, you know what, no, we're just going to do the big four, deal with it, right? So what would happen if you had agreed? And I think that would be a cherry on the top. But I like the results as well. Like, you gave me example 3 totally new companies who didn't come to your campus before, and you were able to bring them. Also, being the thing that you mentioned about, like we were very young and we didn't really know how to do that, and we didn't have alumni support. I think those were well done. In terms of whether a college example works, I think it really depends on the quality of the example. Sometimes, and this is like a strategy that I used in my business school interviews, and also when I was recruiting out of business school, which was like a year back. So sometimes when I have 2 examples, I would just ask the interviewer, like, "Hey, that's a great question. I actually have an example of when I had to disagree with someone back in college, and also another one in my startup. Do you have a preference on which one you'd like to hear first?" And if that person says that, you know what, I don't have any preference, you tell me whatever, then you're off the hook, right? Then you can just pick the college example, because then, but if the interviewer said, Kriti, I would really like to hear about a more recent example, then you just don't use the college example. I think often one of the things that I've seen people do is treat the interviewer like their boss, like, which it's not the case, right? Like, they want to hire you. So just asking them, like, I have these 2 stories. Do you want to hear a specific one? It's totally fine. Like, nobody is going to say, how dare you ask me a question? Like, That's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Got it.
I
Yeah.
think overall, really good answer. I liked it a lot. I think if you structure them at the beginning, I think you went a little bit long on the problem. I think you
Mm-hmm.
could cut it down a little bit because the crux of the problem is like, look, we had these 5, 6 set of companies who would come every day, but our students were excited about recruiting for something else. So when our placement committee, which I was a part of, decided to really not push and just do the status quo, I disagreed, and I was able to convince them to get these new companies. But it was I was on my own, so I had to set up this team, blah blah blah, and then you can go through your task, action, results, and move along. But overall, solid. I mean, I
Got it.
think I think it was good. Cool.
Okay.
So, Kriti, can you tell me about a time when you had to use data to come to a decision?
Sure. So working with one of the big fours, I actually use data a lot in my daily decision making and also most of my deliverables. But specifically, one instance where I had to use data to come to a decision was when at my recent client, wherein I was working with one of the top tech companies, and we actually had to give a report, a deliverable to our client stating whether or not the work that we've been doing is actually mitigating the risk month by month and mitigating the trend that we've been seeing in fraud protection activities. So I had to use a lot of data because I had to analyze all of our past trends, all of our past risks that we had identified. And I also had to kind of use all of that, not in a typical traditional PPT or an Excel, but I had to put all of that data in a Power BI, which is a tool to visualize data and work with data in a more productive and a visually aesthetic manner. Because this deliverable was supposed to go out to the top leaders of the company, and just presenting a mere PPT or an Excel presentation would not, I think I could do something different, use data in a more easy manner. So this was one of the instances where I used data to not come at a decision, but this was to kind of showcase how our work had been uh, positively working with the company, and the client really appreciated it because for the first time we kind of did not go with the traditional PPT presentation, but we used a Power BI tool to showcase the data to them and also show how our work had been performing since the past around 7 months.
Okay, cool. Tell me, how do you feel about this one?
No, I don't feel good about this one because I actually was at a loss of what instance to talk about because my work
Yeah,
is kind of just with data. So I've not really come to a decision because of data because we use data for everything that we do. So I really could not think of one instance where I specifically use data to arrive at something. But
right.
yeah, I think I should. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this one was a little weak. By a little, I mean a lot. So I
Mhm.
think the first thing is, you didn't really answer the question, right? I think visualizing data is a totally different thing than using data to like generate insights. I think
Mhm.
if you could, uh, and again, feel free to engage your interviewer if you're unsure. Like, so for example, if you tell me, thanks, Shovik, for the question. I have one specific example where we really worked hard to change the way we show data to our client. Would you like to hear about that? So that way,
Mhm.
if that example doesn't really work, I can tell you, no, Kriti, can you tell me a little bit more about the analysis work that you did, right? So then you would know that, okay, this answer is not going to cut it. And you can say that, can I think about the answer for a couple of seconds? And then take that time and think about an example where you use data. And look, the other thing that I think I like to tell people is often when people think about data, they think about like spreadsheets or SQL and stuff like that. Data could just be, like information. It doesn't have to necessarily be big data, or it doesn't necessarily have to be, like millions of rows in a spreadsheet. So think about an
Yeah.
example where maybe you had to decide between A and B, and then one of the ways you were able to make that decision was to use data. Maybe everybody thought we should do A, but the data actually told you we should do B. The other example that I think works really well here, and I'm pretty sure you have different kinds of examples for your from your consulting background or maybe from your startup. Often data tells you the wrong thing because you're not using data the right way. Right? So I think the like one of the easiest example of this one is a little bit of a digress, but stay with me. So like this is like the early stock scam where a person who's like a stockbroker would tell 10 people to pick like the Apple stock, for example. And let's say the next day the Apple stock goes up. So what the person would do is then tell 5 people that, hey, the next day Apple would go up. The other 5 people, Apple would go down. So if the stock again goes up the other day, 5 people would think that, oh, this guy's like a genius, and then so on and so forth. Ultimately, there would be a group of people who would think that this person is like God. So my point is, if you just look at data without any context, often you get the wrong idea, and only if you like put in context or drill it down, then you realize that, oh, okay, there is a problem. Another example is to draw like macro trends from data. Like for example, if you look at the US, the US GDP has I mean, disregard coronavirus for a second, but till 2019, the US GDP has grown really, really well. And one conclusion from that is people have been getting wealthier. But is that the right conclusion? We don't know. Like maybe the distribution of wealth has been fairly different, and people actually have been getting poorer. It's only the super rich have been getting even more rich. So I think you can bring in something like that where you had to really dive deep into data to get into peculiar insight that wouldn't be apparent if you didn't do that drill down. So do you think you'll have you don't have to do it now, but I think eventually you should have some example where you show off like your analytical skills. I think that will be helpful.
Yeah, I can think of one answer right now. Maybe I could take another shot at it, or if you want to do another question, we could do that as well. I mean, either or.
No, feel free. Take another shot. Let's see what happens.
Okay, so this was at the time when I was working with the NGO. So I was given the mandate to make a management control system for them in a lot of their internal departments. One of the departments was fundraising, which is actually the backbone of an NGO, because that is how we get the revenue in, and that is how all the other programs actually end up working and have the sustainability. Before starting, I was told that the department is not performing well because we're not able to meet the targets, and there is some problem with the resources because they are not doing the job that they're supposed to do. In this specific case, data helped me because I had a lot of information with which I could work. And I went back to just how the calls were being made, because that's how they were doing their fundraising. And I took a sample of around 70, 80 calls that they were making on a daily basis. And this was at the time of New Year's. So after running through the calls, I realized that there was a specific point in time where the calls were getting dropped off. Around 40 seconds is what I came to the conclusion at after running the analysis. And I actually could figure out that the calls were getting dropped because the person who was engaging, the person who was making the calls, they were stretching the calls too long during a Christmas season. And people at that time are not really interested in having calls which go on for so long without telling them the purpose behind it. So I actually recommended to them that we should cut down the script and come to the point earlier, which would be around 15 to 20 seconds. A lot of testing went into this to kind of come at the optimal time at which they should cut the call or come to the point for which the call was made. So a lot of data went into it, a lot of analysis went to it, a lot of sample calls were audited, and a lot of test calls were also made to kind of realize what was the optimal time at which we could target. So this was one place where the data helped me make a decision, because I came to realize and came to a conclusion that it was not the resources which the management had earlier thought were the core of the problem, but it was just how they were not able to utilize the data. We had so much historical data which we could use and then make the recommendation on what
Right.
would be the optimal timelines. And we actually saw quite a lot of decrease in the call drops. First, when I started,
Right.
we were at around 70% of call drops, and when I ended, we were at 50 or 45%. So that was a good decrease that I could bring about with the help of data.
Yeah, no, this is a fantastic answer. This is so much better. You're clearly outlining a problem, telling me how you used data to solve it. It's also, I think it's very similar to the thing that I was talking about. It's all about context, right? Like, I mean, you
Yeah.
would generally think that the the more you're talking to someone, the better is your chance to get money from them, right? But
Yeah.
it's not always the case, especially when it's Christmas or when it's over the phone. Things are totally different. No, I do think that this was a much better example. I think you should use this one.
Yeah. Okay.
All right,
And
cool.
should I
Let me move
get
on
in?
to another question. Yeah,
Okay,
go
sure,
ahead.
sure. Just one thing. Should I
No, go ahead.
speak more about the analysis that I specifically did? Like, do I need to speak about the tools that I use? Because this was more of a qualitative analysis than specifically running data in SAP or something like that. Because I had to actually kind of look beyond the data and kind of get at the answer. So do I still need to speak a lot about the tools specifically, or um, like this
No,
would be
I
fine
don't
how I
think
spoke?
so. Yeah, it's also like, nobody really is talking about. I mean, it's not a question on really evaluating your data skills. Like, no, I mean, you will learn that. Like, I mean, it's just, like learning a few different softwares and maybe learning a little bit of like a scripting language. So that's not the
Yeah.
skill that, is being tested here. The skill is more about,
Mhm.
do you have intuition? Like, do
Yeah.
you know when data will come in handy, and do you know what to basically do with the data? So I think you were
Got it.
fine. I think it would be maybe a little better to talk about what was the problem. So in this case, the problem was you were not getting enough funds, right? And
Yeah.
then explain
Correct.
to me, like, one of the ways to get funds is to, like, get on these calls, and like, I was
Hmm.
tasked with analyzing these calls to see what was going wrong. So
Got it.
one of the other ways that you can maybe make this problem a little bit more challenging, so you can talk about, there were so many different variables. There were variables such as, where these calls were going, what time of the day,
Correct.
what kind of
Correct.
language was being spoken, which state was these calls going to, the duration of the call, and stuff like that. I think then that way you would be able to tell your interviewer that, look, I mean, I had so much data, and I had to zero in on what really matters, which is what they're looking for
Yeah.
here, right? So,
Yeah.
so
Got
yeah,
it.
so I think that would maybe add some value to your answer.
Got it.
All right, cool. So let's uh, let's do another question real quick. I think this will probably be our last one, right? So, can you tell me about a time when when you mentored someone, or when you helped someone? Tell me a little bit more around what you did and what was the outcome.
Sure. Again, I would like to take us, or I have actually two instances that I could talk about. One goes back to my startup, which is a bit more recent, and one is also an experience in college when I was leading the placement cell and heading my marketing club. So, if you would have any preference, I
Okay.
could, yeah, I would. I mean,
Yeah,
I can speak on
I think
either.
I heard an example from your college. I would love to know about the startup example.
Okay, sure. So when we started our startup, which is called 98 Fields, we did not have a lot of resources to actually hire many people because we had just started out
Okay.
and we could not hire specialized people. One of the first challenges that we faced was to get a lot of sellers on board because that's how my e-commerce marketplace would build with as many sellers that we could probably get on board. Since we were a little low on our resources in terms of our cash flow, I had to hire someone who was not specifically, actually, who had no experience in seller management or speaking with sellers or introducing sellers to our platform due to the constraints. When I hired her, she was more of a behind the scenes kind of a person because she was used to doing a lot of design work, but not face to face work. But I saw potential in her,
Okay.
and which is why when I hired her, I worked directly with her. I mentored her on how she could speak with these sellers, make her connect with them, and also how she could build trust with them. We started with having joint calls, wherein I would be on the call as well, and my mentee, she would also be on call with the sellers. And now I'm very happy to kind of also say that she is completely running the seller management and seller onboarding area on her own. When we
Okay.
started with her, she could not even, she was not confident in holding even one call on her own. But now I can see the change in her. She takes regular calls. She is regularly in connect with all of our sellers and regularly helping them achieve their potential now. So that is one place where I feel like I have been able to mentor someone and have actually been able to see the results out of it, because now she's managing the entire department on her own, which is kind of like an
Okay.
achievement on its own.
Cool. Okay. So good answer overall. I also think this is a good example. This is a very time-tested example when somebody wasn't performing, and because of your amazing mentorship, this person is now a top performer. So I think that I think this generally works overall. I think a couple of things to add here. Mentorship is like a really good place for you to, show your empathy. So when you talk about, this person was not performing, you told me one reason, like this person was used to doing only the design stuff, maybe had no experience with seller management and whatnot. So walk me through, why that was important to you. So tell me a little bit. Huh. Okay. Good. Kriti, can you hear me?
Your voice broke out a little bit. I'm so sorry. I could just hear, tell me a little bit about why this was important, but I do not have the context of it.
Let me quick. This happens. This happens generally. It happen doing a live video. I'm just making sure my Wi-Fi is in order. Oh, can you? Hey, Kriti, how about now? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right. Perfect. All you need to do is to just turn off your Wi-Fi and turn it back on, and it just magically starts working. All right. Cool. So yeah, so I think one of the things that I would like you to talk a little bit more about is, why didn't you fire her? Why didn't you just hire someone new? And I think one of the ways to get to that is to show empathy. Like, talk a little bit more about, okay, this person was not doing well. She had a background in design and didn't really have a lot of operational experience. And then talk a little bit more about how this was exactly like how you were. Like, as I reflected
Got it.
to how I started, and I had these similar issues because I was more passionate with the product and I wasn't really into operations at all, which is why I took it upon myself to really help her, because I got help from my mentors and I wanted to pay it
Yeah,
forward. So that sort
got
of
it.
shows
Yeah,
empathy. That sort of also shows how you like to acknowledge that you got support. So you want to help other people have the same support system. um, I
got it.
think there was a little bit of a lack of structure into how you helped. I heard you were present in calls, right? I think you said something else that I don't remember right now, but I would lay down these actions. Like, the way I offered help was to shadow her in her calls, give her feedback on a regular basis, and then three, maybe encouraging her whenever I saw signs of success, and really making sure
Got it.
she knows when she did really well. So I think
Got
that
it. Yeah.
would then also help adding that structure to your mentorship. Does that make
Got
sense?
it. Makes sense. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Cool. So we have reached the end of the interview. Kriti, do you have any questions
Okay.
for me?
I do actually. I just wanted to know that since you're an alum of Fuqua, I wanted to know if when you were in my place, when you were going through your MBA decisions and when you were actually in the school, was it easy to make the transition if you had to from one background or one industry to another? And actually, how did Fuqua help you get your or achieve your career goals?
Okay, cool. Let's assume I answered that question. I think that was a good question. I think I was telling Karthik, who I interviewed yesterday, was that the best questions are basically you're trying to get your interviewer to talk about themselves. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
this is a good question. I think what I would
Okay.
recommend is that at some point your interviewer would introduce themselves, right? I mean, I didn't do that because I didn't want to waste time, but when they introduce themselves, take note of what they did prior to MBA
Got it.
and what they
Hmm.
did after MBA, and then weave
Hmm.
it in your answer. Like, hey, when you were introducing yourself, I learned that you transitioned from a retail background to consulting through an MBA. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you made that happen? And then that person would go on and on about, yeah, I went to the consulting club and I did this, I did that, and you just pretend to listen, right? So I think that's pretty much it. Okay, cool.
Got it.
Do you have any other question for me?
No, that's about it.
Okay, don't do that, right? Always have more
Okay.
questions, just in
Okay.
case.
Okay.
Some interviewers can be a little bit jerky and just, constantly ask, okay, do you have more question? Do you have more question? It's a test. It's a test on, like,
Okay.
how are you really engaging? Do you really have questions about the interviewer so that you can learn more about Fuqua? So I would say have like 3 to 5 questions in your back pocket. I mean, you can talk a little bit more about, like, can you tell me about your internship project, or can you tell me about this specific thing that you did? What do you miss the most about Fuqua? Can you tell me some of the best examples of Team Fuqua, which is their
Hmm.
thing, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
just have questions. I think saying that,
Got it.
you know what, that's all. I am dying to get out of here and never see you again. Not the best messaging. Okay.
Got it. Yeah.
All right, cool. So, Kriti, thanks so much for joining us. This was great. I hope this was helpful, right? You
It was.
mentioned that you haven't done much of interview prep, but you clearly have. There's a lot of structure that's coming out of your answers. You have strong stories. Let me know if you need any help in the process. But I wish you all the best. Keep me and the rest of GMAT Club posted on your
For
interview
sure.
progress, your application results. So we would love to be in the know.
For sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. This was really helpful. GMAT Club has always been so helpful. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. I'm happy to know that. Thanks, Kriti. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.